The royal starship of the Aurelian Empire moved slowly across the darkness of space. Its shining hull reflected the light of a nearby blue planet called Earth. Inside the high crystal halls of the ship, everything was quiet and perfect. The walls hummed softly with energy, and silver-robed attendants moved like whispers between glass columns. In the center of the main chamber sat Princess Kaelira, daughter of the Aurelian High Queen. Her long silver hair fell around her shoulders, and her pale blue eyes studied the holographic screen in front of her. She was not only a royal figure but also a scholar, a thinker who searched for meaning beyond her empire's pride. Kaelira had learned about hundreds of species across the stars. She had read about their wars, their science, their ways of living, but among all, the humans of Earth puzzled her the most. They were not the most powerful race in the galaxy. Their ships were small, their technology far behind the Aurelians, yet they survived against every hardship, even in places where stronger races had fallen. They built homes in deserts, cities in storms, and dreams in the middle of endless chaos. Kaelira could not understand how a species so fragile could stand so tall. When her ship came near Earth, she received a message from the Council. A human soldier had saved one of their transport ships from pirates near the border of human and Aurelian space. The soldier's name was Ethan Cole. He had risked his life to protect people who were not his own kind. He could have run away, but instead he stayed and fought. The council wanted to honor him, and the princess herself requested to meet him. She said it was for study, but secretly she was curious. When Ethan was brought aboard the royal ship, he was both amazed and uneasy. The walls shimmered like crystal, and the air smelled clean and cold. He stood in his plain military uniform, feeling out of place among the elegant aliens who stared at him with silent wonder. When the doors opened and Princess Kaelira entered the hall, everyone bowed deeply. She walked toward him with calm grace, her steps light as if gravity did not touch her. Ethan straightened, unsure of what was expected, but she gave him a small nod, and that made him relax a little. "Human soldier," she said, her voice soft and echoing. "You have done something no Aurelian would expect from an outsider. You saved our people when you had no reason to. For that, the Aurelian Empire thanks you." Ethan bowed slightly. "Just doing what's right, Your Highness." Doesn't matter who they were. Her eyes studied him carefully. There was no fear, no greed, no arrogance, only a quiet steadiness. She had seen many ambassadors from other worlds, but this one spoke differently. His words were simple, yet they carried a kind of warmth she had never felt from her own kind. She gestured for him to sit, and soon they began to talk. At first, she asked about Earth, its lands, its seas, and its people. Ethan spoke about the crowded cities, the long deserts, the cold mountains, and the endless oceans. He told her how humans laughed and fought, how they celebrated victories and mourned their dead. She listened with growing fascination. Aurelians were logical and emotionless. Their society was built on order and control. Love, anger, or joy were seen as distractions. Yet this man spoke as if emotion itself gave power to life. Kaelira's curiosity deepened. She asked about human families, how children were born, and how humans chose partners. Her scientists had explained human biology before, but the way humans attached emotion to those acts confused her. She leaned forward slightly and asked in a calm, innocent tone, "Tell me, human, how often do your people join together? How often do you mate?" The question came out of pure study, not offense or desire. But in that grand hall, the silence that followed was almost heavy. The guard standing near the wall stiffened, and Ethan blinked in surprise. He wasn't sure he had heard her right. The princess tilted her head, her silver hair shining under the light, waiting for an answer with calm, serious eyes. Ethan cleared his throat, trying not to laugh. He realized she was not being rude, just curious in her own royal scientific way. "That's kind of a private question, Your Highness," he said with a small smile. Kaelira frowned lightly. "Private? Is it forbidden to speak of?" "Not forbidden," Ethan said carefully, "just personal. On Earth, that kind of thing means something more than just a physical act. It's emotional." She looked puzzled. "Emotional? You mean connected to the mind?" He shook his head. "Not the mind, more like the heart. It's hard to explain. Humans don't do it just because their bodies tell them to. We do it when we care about someone." Kaelira sat back slowly, still studying him. "You mean you wait? You choose when?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Sometimes once in a lifetime. Sometimes people wait until they're sure. It's not about how often, it's about why." The princess went silent. For a moment she forgot she was speaking to an alien. The concept of emotion-based union was foreign to her. Her people had abandoned such connections centuries ago. Aurelians reproduced through technology and genetic pairing. There was no closeness, no warmth, no reason beyond population control. Her own birth had been planned, her mother chosen by numbers and logic, but this human spoke as if connection itself was sacred. Ethan noticed her confusion. "Your people don't have something like that?" he asked softly. Kalira hesitated before answering. "We reproduce for continuation. No emotion is necessary. Bonds only weaken decision-making. It has always been this way." "Maybe that's what makes us different," Ethan said quietly. "Humans fight for people they love. They die for them too. It's not logical, but it's what keeps us going." His words hung in the air. For a moment, even the sound of the ship's engines seemed to fade. Kalira's expression softened slightly. "That is strange," she murmured. "And yet, it sounds beautiful." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's just messy and complicated. But it's ours." Later, when the conversation ended, Kalira returned to her private quarters, her mind heavy with new thoughts. The idea that a species could attach emotion to survival fascinated her. She walked to the wide viewing window that looked out at Earth below. The planet glowed like a soft jewel in the darkness. She wondered what it must feel like to live on that world, to laugh, to fear, to love. She touched her hand to the glass and felt a strange ache in her chest. That night she accessed the ship's database and began to watch human recordings, old films, music, and stories. She saw humans cry over loss and smile through pain. She saw them risk everything for those they cared about. Their emotions made them unpredictable, but also powerful in ways she could not measure. As she watched a scene of two humans embracing under the rain, she found her own heartbeat rising. It was an unfamiliar rhythm, not of control but of feeling. For the first time in her long royal life, Princess Kalira felt something she could not describe. It was not love, not yet, but curiosity that burned brighter than logic. When morning came, she requested to see Ethan again, not as a diplomat, but as a friend. Her attendants whispered that such an invitation was unheard of, but the princess did not care. She wanted to ask him more, not about war or politics, but about humanity itself. She wanted to know how emotions could guide a species so well, when her people believed emotion to be weakness. And somewhere deep inside her, though she would not admit it, she wanted to understand what it truly meant to care. The next morning, the royal attendants entered Princess Kalira's chamber to find her already awake. She had not rested much during the night. The human's words still echoed in her mind, circling like quiet music she could not forget. The idea that emotion could be a strength was new to her, but it felt true. Her thoughts kept returning to that one sentence Ethan had said, "It's not about how often. It's about why." Kalira had lived her life surrounded by logic. Every decision she made was weighed by reason. Every choice followed calculation. Yet for the first time, reason felt small. There was something greater, something she could not measure by data or equations. She wanted to understand it not as a ruler, but as herself. She sent a message to the human quarters asking Ethan Cole to meet her again. When he arrived, he looked more relaxed than before. He had been given a temporary uniform by the ship's attendants, a dark silver suit that fitted awkwardly on his broad shoulders. When he stepped into her chamber, he bowed slightly, unsure of how formal to be. Kalira noticed his discomfort and smiled gently. "Do not bow," she said softly. "I wish to speak, not to rule." Ethan nodded. "Then I'll just talk, Your Highness." "Call me Kalira," she said after a pause. It is simpler. That small request surprised him. No one had told him to speak to a royal without title. He smiled faintly. "All right, Kalira." The princess gestured toward a wide glass wall that showed the earth below. The planet turned slowly, clouds moving like soft white waves over blue oceans. The sight was beautiful and distant, yet so alive. Kalira spoke as they looked together. "I have studied thousands of worlds," she said quietly. "But yours, your people, confuse me. You fight each other, destroy your own lands, and yet you keep creating beauty. You lose everything and then you rebuild. I cannot understand that kind of strength." Ethan took a slow breath. "Maybe that's what being human is. We break, but we keep going. We get scared, we get angry, but somehow we stand up again. Maybe it's because we feel so much." Kalira turned her head slightly to look at him. "Feeling," she repeated. "It is the part that drives you?" He nodded. "Yeah, sometimes it makes us foolish." But sometimes it makes us heroes. Her eyes softened. Heroes, she whispered. A word my people have not used for centuries. He smiled faintly. Maybe you don't need heroes when everything is perfect. That line lingered in her mind. Perfection, something her empire had chased for ages. Order, stability, peace without emotion. But perhaps peace without heart was not peace at all, only silence. She decided to test a thought. Human, she said carefully. Yesterday you spoke of connection, of joining not because of command, but because of care. I want to understand what that means. How can emotion have such power over choice? Ethan paused, trying to think of simple words. Well, it's like this. When we care about someone, we want to protect them, even if it costs us something. It's not logic, it's instinct. But it also gives us strength we didn't know we had. Kalira studied his face. His voice carried sincerity, not pride. You risked your life for strangers, she said softly. Why? Because it was right, he answered without hesitation. Didn't matter who they were. They were alive. That was enough. Her hands folded gently before her. You could have died, he shrugged. Someone had to do something. If I didn't, maybe nobody would. Kalira's voice lowered. My people would call that irrational, Ethan smiled. Maybe it is. But sometimes being human means doing the right thing even when it makes no sense. Kalira was silent for a long time. She looked down at her hands, delicate and pale, shaped by generations of perfection. I envy that, she admitted quietly. Ethan tilted his head. Envy? Yes, she said. I have lived among cold logic all my life. Every move planned, every decision calculated. But I have never acted because my heart demanded it. I have never known what that feels like. Ethan looked out the window again. It's not easy. Caring hurts sometimes. But it also gives life meaning. Her eyes followed his. The earth below shone like a memory she never had. Perhaps meaning is what we have lost, she said in a low voice. Later, she took him on a tour of the ship. As they walked through long corridors of glass and silver, every Aurelian they passed stopped and stared. Some bowed. Others whispered behind their hands. It was strange for them to see their princess walking beside a human soldier. Yet Kalira did not care. For once, she did not follow custom. She wanted to see through human eyes. They stopped at the Aurelian data archives, where memory crystals stored centuries of history. She showed him how her people preserved knowledge, every thought, every image, perfect and eternal. Ethan watched with quiet respect. You've got everything saved, he said. But do you ever feel it? Kalira turned to him, puzzled. Feel it? Yeah, memories aren't just facts for us. They're feelings. We remember how something made us feel, not just what happened. That made her pause. Her people recorded everything, but emotion was absent from their archives. No joy, no pain, only cold data. She realized for the first time how empty it was. They walked again, reaching a garden dome filled with alien plants that glowed with soft light. The air was warm and smelled faintly of rain. Kalira motioned for Ethan to sit on a stone bench. I have one more question, she said. You said humans choose when to bond. How can you trust such a choice? Emotions change. Ethan nodded slowly. They do. But trust is what makes the choice matter. Love isn't about being perfect, it's about choosing someone even when things get hard. Kalira listened in silence. Her world had no place for such ideas. She had been raised to think emotion brought only chaos. Yet this man spoke as if emotion built everything strong. It challenged everything she believed. As the soft light of the garden shimmered around them, she looked at him and said quietly, Your species is fragile, yet powerful. You live so little time compared to us, but in that time you feel everything. You fear, you dream, you hope. Perhaps that is what we have forgotten. Ethan smiled gently. Maybe. But you can remember it. Her eyes lifted toward the dome's ceiling where stars shone like silver dust. Perhaps I will try, she said. A faint silence followed, peaceful and strange. Ethan could feel that this conversation meant something far beyond the surface. The princess who had once seen humans as simple now looked at them with wonder. When they parted that evening, Kalira stood by the window again, watching Earth as it turned below. The blue oceans shimmered like living mirrors. She placed her hand against the glass and whispered to herself, They feel because they live, and they live because they feel. For the first time in her life, she felt small tears gather in her eyes. It frightened her at first. Aurelians were not supposed to cry, but the warmth behind that feeling was something she didn't want to lose. In her heart, a question began to grow. If humans could change the way she saw existence with just their words, what else could they teach the stars? Ethan returned to his quarters that night with thoughts of his own. The princess's curiosity had not been prideful or arrogant. It had been real. He had seen her walls of logic begin to crack and something human bloom within her. It made him feel hope. Maybe someday humans and Aurelians could be more than allies of convenience. Maybe they could be friends who understood each other not just through treaties, but through shared feeling. The ship moved silently through orbit as both of them looked toward the same planet from different rooms, thinking of the same idea. That something greater than power connected living beings across the stars. And though neither of them spoke it out loud, both had begun to understand that the bridge between two worlds did not need to be built of steel or light. It could be built of heart. The next few days passed slowly on the royal ship. Princess Kaelira found herself distracted during meetings and research. The words of the human echoed in her thoughts like quiet songs she could not silence. She had begun to question everything she had once believed about order, logic, and emotion. Her tutors and advisors noticed the change, but none dared to speak of it. She still carried the calm face of a ruler, but inside her heart something was shifting like a planet finding a new orbit. At night, she no longer read data reports. Instead, she watched recordings from Earth. She listened to human music, soft piano notes, voices full of feeling. Each sound carried warmth she had never known. She watched old films showing people laughing, crying, embracing one another under the rain, promising to wait for someone far away. None of it made sense to her logic, yet she could not look away. Her cold and perfect world suddenly felt too quiet. One morning, she asked her attendants to open the observation dome. She stood beneath a field of stars and thought about Ethan Cole, the human who had spoken to her with honesty, not fear. His eyes had no glow like her kind, yet there was something bright inside them. She wanted to understand it better. She wanted to understand him. She sent a personal request to his quarters again. The attendants were surprised. A princess rarely met the same guest twice without ceremony, but Kaelira ignored protocol. When Ethan arrived, he found her standing beside a table filled with glowing crystals. She smiled lightly, something rare for her kind. "Good morning, Kaelira," he said politely. "Good morning, Ethan," she answered. "I have been studying something new. I call it emotion analysis." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Sounds complicated." "It is confusing," she admitted. "No machine can measure it. No formula defines it. So I decided to learn it directly." He smiled faintly. "And how do you plan to do that?" She looked at him, eyes calm but curious. "I wish to experience how humans connect. Not physically, but through what you call feeling. I want to know why your species risks so much for it." Ethan hesitated. He was no teacher of hearts. He was a soldier used to giving orders and taking them, yet the sincerity in her voice moved him. He nodded slowly. "All right. I'll show you in the only way I know, through stories." Kaelira agreed, and they sat together in the dome's garden, surrounded by soft, glowing plants and the endless stars above. Ethan began to tell her stories of Earth. He spoke of a child who waited years for her father to return from war. He spoke of two friends who rebuilt their village after a storm destroyed everything. He spoke of an old woman who fed stray dogs every morning, even when she had little food herself. Kaelira listened without interruption. Her eyes stayed on his face, trying to read every emotion behind his words. Each story carried something that numbers could never hold: pain, hope, sacrifice, love. She felt her own chest tighten at moments she could not explain. "Why?" she finally asked. "Do humans help others when they gain nothing from it?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Because it reminds us we're not alone. It gives life meaning. Sometimes kindness is its own reward." Kaelira looked down at her hands, delicate and still. "Meaning?" she repeated softly. "A word my people use but do not feel." He smiled. "Maybe that's why you're asking these questions. You're looking for meaning, not just answers." Her gaze lifted slowly. "Perhaps I am," she whispered. They stayed together for hours. She asked him about fear, about courage, about the strange human need to touch and hold. Ethan explained as simply as he could. He told her that sometimes people needed no words, just the presence of another person beside them. He spoke about how fear could be defeated by love, how loneliness could end with a single smile. Kaelira's thoughts deepened with every word. Your world is full of chaos, she said, yet it feels alive. My world is perfect, but it feels empty. Ethan answered softly. Maybe perfection kills the soul. Maybe a few cracks are what let the light in. Her heart trembled slightly. She did not understand all of it, but she felt something real stir inside her chest. For the first time, she wished she could walk on Earth's soil, feel its rain, and see the stars from below rather than above. The next day, she took Ethan to one of the ship's quiet domes where simulations of planets could be projected. She asked the engineers to display Earth's surface. Mountains rose from the floor, winds moved softly, and air smelled faintly of grass. Kalira stepped barefoot onto the green projection. The feeling was strange, warm and soft. Ethan watched her walk slowly, like someone discovering life for the first time. So this is your world, she murmured. It feels gentle. It is, he said, and sometimes it's cruel too. But it's ours. She looked up at the sky of the simulation where a bright digital sun glowed. You live under this light yet still dream of the stars, she said. He chuckled. Maybe that's what humans do best. We dream of more. Her expression softened. You dream even when you suffer? Especially then, he said quietly. Dreams keep us alive. Kalira stopped walking. I think I begin to understand why you said it's not about how often. It's about why. He nodded gently. You do? Yes, she said, voice trembling a little. Because what you call connection is not just a physical need. It's the wish not to be alone. It is a choice made with the heart, not the body. Ethan smiled. Exactly. She took a slow breath. Then we have forgotten something sacred. As they spoke, a faint alert tone sounded through the dome. The ship's systems reported a small meteor storm passing near. Kalira ignored it. She was lost in thought. The meteor flashes outside the real hull filled the sky with brief streaks of light. She turned to Ethan and said softly, Look, falling stars. Ethan watched beside her. On Earth, people make wishes when they see them. Wishes? She asked. You mean hope? Yeah, he said, smiling. Hope for something better. Something we don't have yet. Kalira stared at the streaks for a long moment. Then I wish to understand, she whispered. I wish to feel as your people do. The room went quiet again except for the hum of the engines. Later that night, Kalira sat alone at her desk, recording her reflections in a personal log. Her voice was calm but filled with a strange softness. Today I learned that the human heart is not guided by reason. It is wild, unpredictable, yet strong. It gives meaning to their brief lives. They may not live long, but they live fully. I envy that. Perhaps emotion is not a flaw, but a force of creation. She stopped speaking and placed her hand over her heart. The beat felt heavier now, alive with thoughts she could not define. She smiled faintly to herself. Maybe this is what it means to feel. On the other side of the ship, Ethan lay in his small cabin, staring at the ceiling. He thought of the princess's calm blue eyes and her growing curiosity. She wasn't just a ruler anymore. She was someone searching for truth. He had met many aliens before, but none had ever asked such honest questions. Somehow her quiet voice had touched something in him too. He turned over and whispered to himself, She's learning what makes us human. Maybe we're learning what makes her special too. Outside, the stars continued to burn in silence. The royal ship moved gently through the galaxy, carrying two souls from different worlds who now shared the same wonder. Neither of them could explain the bond forming between them, but it was there. Gentle, respectful, filled with curiosity. It was not love yet, nor friendship alone. It was something deeper, something rare. It was the moment when two beings from different galaxies looked at each other and finally saw not species, not rank, not difference, only understanding. And for Princess Kalira, that understanding was the beginning of change. The royal ship drifted in silence through deep space, its shining surface glowing faintly in the distant starlight. Inside the observation dome, Princess Kalira stood alone, her reflection floating over the endless darkness. She had not seen Ethan for 2 days. He had been called to assist the engineering crew with navigation work, and though their last meeting had ended peacefully, she had felt a strange emptiness since then. She tried to focus on her duties, but every report and royal document felt lifeless. Numbers and charts no longer held the meaning they once did. Her thoughts returned again and again to the human stories, the sound of his voice, the warmth of his laughter, and the strange feeling that had begun to bloom inside her heart. When she finally called for him again, it was not for questions or lessons. She simply wanted to see him. The guards escorted Ethan to her chamber. He entered, saluting lightly. You called for me, Kalira? She nodded. Yes, I wish to talk, but not as a scholar or a princess, just as one being to another. Ethan smiled kindly. Then I'll listen. She looked at him, searching for words. Since our first talk, I have tried to understand emotion. At first I thought it was only a weakness, a flaw that caused chaos. But now I see it may be the greatest strength a species can have. It gives purpose. It gives color to existence. But I do not know what to do with it. My people have forgotten how to feel. Ethan stepped closer. Then maybe it starts with one person remembering. Maybe that person is you. Kalira looked surprised. Me? Why not? He said softly. You're already changing. The others will follow your example someday. That's how it always begins, with someone brave enough to care. She lowered her gaze, her voice quiet. I have been trained to lead through reason. If I show feeling, they may think I've lost control. Or maybe, Ethan said, they'll finally see what control really means, not hiding what's real, but using it to make life better. For a long moment, Kalira said nothing. Then she smiled faintly. You speak like a philosopher, Ethan Cole, he chuckled. Not really. I just speak like a human. The princess laughed softly, a rare, gentle sound. Her attendants outside the door froze when they heard it. No one on the ship had ever heard their princess laugh before. That day they spent hours walking through the garden dome. The glowing plants swayed gently under artificial light. Ethan showed her how to listen, to the soft hum of air, to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. He told her that on Earth, people often stop to feel the wind or the warmth of sunlight. To her, it sounded simple, yet it filled her chest with strange calmness. As they walked, she said, When you spoke before about humans joining together, you said it is about trust and choice. I have thought about that every day. I used to believe that duty was everything. But duty without feeling is just emptiness. You humans seem to live your short lives with more meaning than my people have in centuries. Ethan looked at her with a soft smile. That's the thing about life, it's short, so we try to make it count. She looked up at the stars through the transparent dome. Your world has pain, and yet you cherish it. My world has perfection, and yet we are empty. Perhaps we are the ones who should be learning from you. Before Ethan could reply, a deep alarm sounded across the ship. The floor trembled slightly, and red lights flickered along the walls. A voice from the intercom spoke urgently in Aurelian language. Kalira's face changed at once. Her calm returned, but her heart beat faster. What's happening? Ethan asked. Kalira turned toward the control panel. Pirates, she said quickly. Raiders from the outer sectors. They must have followed our signal. They are preparing to attack. Without hesitation, Ethan said, Then I'm going to help your defense teams. Kalira shook her head. You are a guest. I'm a soldier, he interrupted gently. And I don't stand by when people are in danger. Her eyes met his. For a heartbeat, she saw the same courage that had once saved her envoy from death. Then she nodded. Very well, go, and be careful. Ethan left quickly, running down the corridor toward the armory. Kalira watched him go, her chest tight with worry. She had never feared for anyone before, not truly. But now she understood what humans meant when they said their hearts could ache. Moments later, the ship shook again. The battle outside had begun. Through the observation windows, streaks of light cut across the darkness as the pirates fired plasma shots. Aurelian fighters launched from the lower bays, but the enemy ships were fast and ruthless. Kalira joined the command deck, her voice calm as she gave orders. Yet beneath her calmness burned a new kind of fear, not for herself, but for the human out there risking his life again. Ethan worked with the defense teams, using his quick instincts and ground combat training. Where the Aurelians hesitated for perfect calculation, he acted with intuition and courage. His decisions saved several crew members when a corridor was hit. The Aurelians began to follow his lead, realizing that sometimes action mattered more than analysis. After long minutes of chaos, the ship's defenses finally repelled the pirates. The last of the enemy vessels vanished into the darkness. Silence returned, broken only by the soft hum of damaged systems. When Ethan returned to the command deck, his suit was scorched and his hands were marked with soot. Kalira hurried toward him, forgetting for a moment the eyes of the entire crew. You're alive, she said softly. He smiled. Still standing? Something broke inside her restraint. She reached forward and touched his arm lightly. You saved them again. Ethan looked around the silent bridge. Every Aurelian officer stared, stunned by their princess's open emotion. Yet Kalira did not withdraw her hand. "He saved you all," she said clearly. "Remember this human who acted when logic would have delayed. Let us learn from him." For the first time, the crew bowed not out of tradition but out of respect. Later, in the quiet of the recovery chamber, Kalira stood beside the window where the stars looked calm again. Ethan sat on a bench nearby, exhausted but smiling faintly. She turned toward him and said, "Now I understand what courage is. It is not about strength or power. It is about caring for others more than yourself." Ethan replied gently, "That's what makes humans who we are." She looked down for a moment, then said softly, "Perhaps it will make me who I want to be." He looked at her, surprised by the emotion in her tone. "You already are," he said. For a while they simply stood together, watching the stars move slowly past the glass. The silence between them was not empty, it was peaceful. Two hearts from two worlds connected by something that could not be written in books or measured in data. When the time came for Ethan to return to Earth, the farewell was quiet. The shuttle bay doors opened and the human prepared to board the small transport ship. Kalira walked beside him, her silver robe flowing softly in the wind of the engines. "You have changed more than one life here," she said gently. "Because of you, I will guide my people differently. I will remind them that perfection without compassion is nothing." Ethan smiled. "And you've changed me too. I used to think aliens couldn't understand us. But now I know. We're not that different." She stepped closer, her voice almost a whisper. "When I first asked you how often humans join together, I wanted to study a body. But you showed me the soul." Ethan looked at her with quiet respect. "And you showed me that even the stars can learn to feel." They looked at each other for a long moment. No words could capture what passed between them. Gratitude, respect, something deeper that would never fade. Then he boarded the shuttle. As the engines roared and the craft lifted away, Kalira stood alone in the bay. She placed a hand over her heart, feeling its steady beat. For the first time, she understood it was not just an organ. It was the center of life, the source of meaning. She whispered softly into the echoing air, "Farewell, human. You have given me something no empire ever could." When the shuttle disappeared into the stars, she turned toward the window and smiled faintly. Somewhere beyond the void was a small blue world, filled with fragile beings who taught her the greatest lesson of all. That emotion is not weakness, but the light that gives purpose to the universe. From that day on, the Aurelian princess ruled differently. Her speeches carried warmth, her decisions held compassion, and in every quiet moment she remembered a human soldier's voice saying, "It's not about how often, it's about why." The galaxy would remember her as the ruler who brought heart back to the stars.